Hey, and welcome to Where Music Meets the Soul. I am here today. I have the luxury of speaking to the Peter Noone of the Hermits. And I am so I'm so enthralled because in my career, you've been around playing for me since House of Blues days.
It's a long time, isn't it? And I do enjoy working with you, Lance. And I especially like that. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. That's a great opening. I'm stealing that.
Oh, that's it. You know what? They do that for me at KABC. They set all that
I'm
up for
stealing it.
me. Yeah,
I'm
when I
stealing
heard
it.
the intro, I was like, that is some impressive stuff. They put that
Yeah.
together. So you have been touring, and I got into an argument with my assistant because we were trying to figure out whether you're the longest touring band in the world. And Rolling
Hmm.
Stones came up and the Beach Boys came up as the only two that could even begin to compete with you. And I think numerically, you blow them away. So,
Well,
how many concerts are you doing now?
I'm down to about 100 now, Lance. I think 100 is perfect, because you can do a couple of weeks and go home and do stuff, have a real life at the same time as working. And I'm just a working class guy. I love to work.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Are you 35 yet? Or, I know you've been in the music industry for a long time.
I
So
have to remind myself every day that I'm not 77 anymore. I'm 78 now.
is that crazy? When people ask me how old I am, I want to say 40. And then I have to think, and no, I'm 63. So
Well, Lance, I was always the youngest guy in the room. Like when I played with the Beatles and the Stones, and I was just this little kid. And when I would be at Abbey Road and I'd walk in on the Beatles and stuff like that, I was just a kid.
right. And
So
it says you
everyone
started
was
when you
nice to
were
me.
15 years old.
Well, I had a hit when I was 15. I started a
Wow.
long time before then. We did all those schlepping round in a van around England. They used to pick me up in the van at school and take me to gigs. And they did Steve Winwood as well. He was younger than me.
Oh, that's crazy traffic.
He's still going, Steve Winwood, yeah.
Not like you. That's the difference. I mean, I want to say you're doing 100 concerts a year at 77. And the only other person that I came across that way was BB King. And BB and I had become really
Yeah.
good. Well, we were really good friends for a long time because I realized with BB, when he toured, those were his friends. And he really
Yeah.
felt more comfortable on the road than he did. Now, you play in the same venues, or is there a new venue every now and then?
There's a new venue every now and then, but I like certain places I like to play. Like I like the Canyon Club and I like little rooms that I can mess around a little bit, so it's not so there's no business like show business.
Right. And I always love the Canyon Club because of the fact that it holds 1,300 people, and yet the worst seat in the house is 70 feet away from the front of the stage.
Well, everybody loves it there. I used to, I mean, you don't know, but I used to go there and see. I saw a load of bands there in my life. I saw Michael McDonald, I saw Dennis Miller.
Yeah.
I'd go often to see there. I love the room. I like to sit in the room and I like to play in the room. You can't
Well,
really get any better than that.
I realized when I ran House of Blues that when I ran the Canyon Club, it was different. For House of Blues, it was tourist. I was in Vegas, I was in New York, I was in New Orleans. Here, I realized you have to cultivate your lineup to your clientele. And then what we realized very quickly is clientele under 18 has no money. They
Yeah.
and that's funny because Live Nation chases those bands. And I'm like, no, I'll stick with Herman's Hermits because those people have to pay and eat dinner and spend money and enjoy themselves. And they're polite and they want to sit down. And if, I always remember like the new because this weekend I have Buck Cherry playing. And
Great.
yeah, and I promised I was going to cook them fried chicken. So I'm not very happy with myself. That was a dumb move. But I will cook them some crazy fried chicken that my specialties I mix Captain Crunch in the flakes.
There you go.
Yeah, and then people love that. But my favorite thing is I see these bands out there that everybody is in such awe and I realize that Peter Noone is just a regular guy who started, first hit at 15, went to music school, and you've been touring. And have you ever calculated how many concerts you've done in your career?
Oh no, I'm afraid to do that. I'd feel old. What I try to do is when I go on stage, I try to be the person on the record. I don't know. Does that make any sense? It's sort
You
of a
know
bit
what? The
stand.
funniest thing is Luann's not here today, but we always say that when we book a band like you, we think the most iconic thing that symbolizes you is your album covers. Because when we were growing up, everything was Captain America. You know, we
Mm,
all knew the album covers. And like, I recognized your band through its album covers. And yet I see
yeah,
these pictures, and some of the bands will send out a picture of all the band members of what they look like today. And I'm like,
yeah.
the customers don't see that. They don't know if it's you wouldn't believe how many times I get a call. Like when I book Foo Fighters, they'll go, "Is that a tribute?" Well, it's a tribute to Dave Grohl's in it. And
Yeah,
we
I'm very interested in that because I keep telling the modern day hermits that they have to look. I said, go and get a Dave Clark 5 album cover, and that's how you should dress on stage.
that is
Because that's how
wow.
the audience want you to look like that.
And it's amazing that you don't try to educate your audience. Yeah, you know, Todd, I've told this story 100 times, but Todd always makes fun of me and he gets on stage and he says, I'm not going to sing Hello, It's Me. If you got a problem with it, go see Lance. And he loves to do that just to mess with me because of what I did to him when I was a kid and he lived in Woodstock at the same time.
Uh-huh.
So so the
Great.
monkeys are having their 60th anniversary. Did you have any interaction with the monkeys?
Yeah, I knew Davey pretty well. I still know Mickey, and I did a few gigs with Peter Talk. So, we, to tell you the truth, Lance, we missed it because we were on tour. We were there with the Beatles and the Stones and the Dave Clark Five on tour, and we didn't ever watch like
Like
afternoon
back
TV
back then, that was 1965, right?
around then.
67.
Yeah.
Um, how many when you went on tour, was it 100 shows, 50 shows? Was it a whole year?
Uh, there's an Elvis Presley interview from Hawaii when Herman's day off, and my day off, I wanted to go and meet Elvis Presley. So I went up the hill with Colonel Tom and a guy called Tom Parker, who was the local promoter, and they took me up to the Hawaiian village, and Elvis was shooting Paradise Hawaiian style, and he punked me. I went into the room, into the Hawaiian village, and he was lying face down on the floor with a bottle of American whiskey in his hand. And I go, oh my goodness, what can I? Because I was a kid, I didn't know what to do. I think I was 17. I didn't know what to do. What shall I leave? Shall I kick him? Shall I wake him up? And then Elvis walked in the room, and the guy on the floor was his stunt double, dressed
Ah,
exactly, looking like him. And then we met all his gang. He had a gang with him all the time. And when he shook hands with Barry, my drummer, he shook his hand and pushed him, and there was a guy called Jerry Schilling kneeling down behind, crouched in that dog position. uh, and he pushed Barry Whitwam over onto the floor, which was, we had no idea that Elvis was a fun, amusing guy. We thought he was like going to be like we'd always heard. And then the next day, there was a newspaper article, and they said Peter Noone, Herman from Herman's Hermits, played the Hula Bowl, and he met on his day off in America. He met Elvis Presley, his all-time hero, and Peter Noone is on his day off from a 360-day tour. And
wow.
I said, wait a second, there's no way we could have done 360-day tours. So we looked, yeah, our managers sent us around the world non-stop.
Right.
We France, Belgium, Holland, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, Spain, Hong Kong, Tel
And
Aviv.
luckily
You
you
know,
weren't married at the time.
well, you couldn't be married at the time
Yeah.
because you're never home. I
Yeah.
mean, I lived with my grandmother,
Yeah,
and
I
she
see
didn't
that
even
all
know
the
I
time.
wasn't there.
Yeah, because people have no idea. A lot of my production guys, I train them, they get stolen by a band, and then
Yeah.
like 10 years later they come back to me and go, "Oh, I don't want to ever do that again." Touring is so hard and people
I still love it though. I kind of, I know people who are not in show business who travel a lot, like wine
right.
dealers and stuff like that. And one of them said to me, the whole thing, I enjoy going to the airport. I enjoy getting on the plane. I enjoy looking at the customers and getting on the plane and feeling lucky that I'm up the front and not in the back, and all that
Right.
stuff. And when I get to work, it's kind of my second home. You know, I think my parents were working class people, and they kind of like going to work and the communion. The meeting other fellas in the band, and they become your mates. We only
Right.
meet at gigs.
But we all strive for that in our lives, is to do something that we make money on that we enjoy. And I think that's a
Oh,
mindset. And to me, I enjoy what I do. I make people happy. I throw parties for people. I get to bring them Peter Noone from Herman's Hermits. And
there
I
you go.
stand on stage and I look at their faces, and that's got to get you so excited because the gleam in their eyes is like they're just so excited to see you there.
It's a bit Paul Anka, but when you go on stage and everybody in the audience has paid to see you, you hope that they are smiling.
Did you know what your first tour that you out? You know what your ticket price was?
I think it was Dusty Springfield, Brian Poole and the Tremolos, and Herman's Hermits, and I think it was £1.50 for
Oh,
all three acts.
the first time you played in the United States, Ticketron had you at for $4.
Wow, they were overcharging. We did a gig at the Pasadena Rose Bowl,
Ah,
and it was $1 a ticket, and of
really?
course, we did 74,000 people.
And back then, $74,000 meant something because now, if you filled the stadium at 74,000, well, I wonder what Taylor Swift's stadium show was at three
Yeah, but
thousand dollars a ticket.
that's what happened. You know what, Lance? I have a feeling that what happened, there was big bands all over the place. My dad was in one, a trombone player, and they were traveling around, and there was 20 people on a bus and 400 suitcases of these people schlepping around England on a bus, and it
And
became.
instruments,
And then the Beatles came along, and they got everything in a van. And they could do the work of a show band, which had three girl singers, a lead singer, a trombone section, a brass section, drummers, percussionists, and Tom Jones was the lead
right?
singer. And then the Beatles came along, and they could recreate all that. Remember, the Beatles' background vocals were normally sung by girls.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, boys, and it was all sung by girls, and then they got these two guys doing it, and they were charming and amusing and actually brilliant, and they got it all in a van,
Yeah.
everything. They
But
even got Ringo's drums and a PA. It
did
was a
you know
crappy PA.
that's how the House of Blues and the Canyon existed? Because we thought, what a place to have a juke joint that had $1 million sound system in it.
There you
And
go.
that's why hopefully you like playing it. I when researching you before I interviewed you, I found out that you were on As the World Turns. You had a role on there?
Yeah, I played Paddington, the strange. They called it Major Domo, and it was like this guy who could fight and seemed like an ex-military guy. And you know what? I had to learn how to fence, sword fence, and like epee and dance around and I was supposed to be like this hard man,
But
and it was great because I got Mickey Dolenz, my friend, a gig on the show. He came and played the Mad Vicar on the show. I took
really,
we, it's just really
but
weird, weird time.
you did some Broadway stuff too, didn't you?
Yeah, I've done a bit of everything. I did three movies with Herman's Hermits and a couple of them on my own, and I did a
But weren't you in
TV series.
Aladdin, and
Yeah,
Sinbad the
and
Sailor?
I did Broadway for a year with Pirates of Penzance, me and Jim Belushi, and I've been around. I've
I
been
have a
around the
great story
block.
about Jimmy. We were so poor when we opened up House of Blues that Jimmy and I drove to San Diego to get to Callaway Golf to get a free club. And I drove him down there for a free club. And I thought to myself, oh, how poor were you that you were willing to waste an entire weekend to go get a free Big Bertha club?
Yeah, he's a good guy, Jimmy. I miss hanging out with him. We had a tour there. We ended up on Broadway. It was great. Always mischief,
You know,
that mischief
Jimmy's
thing.
into growing pot now.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
And
Well, I'm sure he's a multi-millionaire by now because of that TV series that goes on forever and ever.
it's
So
funny because I see it on every channel,
we should go.
according to Jim.
You should go and get that club back.
Which one?
the
The
Callaway
house.
Club.
Oh, yeah. It's funny. I'm a terrible golfer. Do you like golf?
No, I refuse to play a game
Oh,
that men 20 years older than me tell me to hurry up.
my wife loves to play golf, and I'll go and play with her, but I find it the most boring thing known to mankind. And it's
I
funny,
can't
but
do
I'll
it.
play mahjong for 15 hours. But I golf is like, ugh, this is terrible.
I'm with
So
you on the mahjong. That's it. Keep you out of trouble.
yeah, is it so you are have been in the industry longer than anybody I've known. So you've seen the changes. Like you saw when they used to have to travel with a whole sound system and now it's a bunch of speakers. And even in my business, like when they introduced new digital boards, they went from these massive 10-foot wide boards to these little tiny boards. So you've seen that. Does that
Mhm.
like did you write all your own music or
Mm, no, but I didn't write any of the good stuff. So, but the whole thing has just got out of control. People tell me they go and see the Eagles, and I go, well, let's hope that's the end of the growth of that. Ever, I say we didn't get a Grammy this year again because we don't have 40 people on stage dancing.
that is true. And I look at you as I was introduced to your music from my parents because you're right. It was Elvis, it was all of that stuff. And I was always blown away because I thought you were the hippest band out there.
Uh-huh.
And you
You've got
sold
very good taste.
60 million records.
They kept putting them out. In 1965, we had 11 top 20 singles. 11. Nobody put out 11 singles. That's ridiculous.
So
But they put out sing.
how did you get all that done? You were 17 years old. What
You
drove
know,
you?
we were working class people, and we didn't know there was any alternative. People said you go in there. And I was once in a dressing room when this guy called Vic something came in the dressing. He was an old band leader, and he said to the Beatles, they were all sitting there with Mel and Neil, their roadies. That was the whole room. And I just happened to be there like an ingratiating, like a kid, just stuck there. And this Vic comes in and he says, do you guys want to play in the Philippines? And they all said, yeah. Nobody said how much, when, nothing. They just wanted to go and play in the Philippines. How about
Like
that? That's
how
who we
much
were.
like I just found what I was saying. You played with the Blue Magoos in
Yeah.
Toronto for $4 in 1967.
Yeah, we would. But
But
we
like what
didn't
would
do
you
it for
get paid?
money.
What would you get paid? Because
I
like
think we
say the
got 10
club
grand a night. I think at Hermits at the top of the game, we're getting 10 grand. And remember, a piece of the door. It was in the days, it was before Peter Grant. Peter Grant was our box office manager.
the
And
funniest thing is people yeah.
he learned that you can't, I used to say, Peter, you can't be the box office manager. You don't know anything about the box office. And he said, Peter, I know one thing. If I'm in the box office, no one else can get in because he was a big fella. And he learned how the Led Zeppelin thing. Remember when he negotiated it? But no, we're not going to do 10% of the door. We want 90% of the door.
Well, now the standard's 85% of the door. So he
Yeah,
won.
he changed the. I
Yeah.
saw it go from the Beatles to that, and I think hopefully. I mean, I know it's a fantastic event, but hopefully the whole what the entertainer thing comes back. That you don't need photographs behind you and hundreds of things going on just to draw your attention away from the song and the story
That's
and
what
the
I always tell Kevin Cronin because he and I have been friends for years. And when he would go out on tour, I say, people want to hear you. And Kevin and
yeah.
REO and Styx and Pat Benatar, they would do these huge stage shows with these LED screens, and people don't care about it. They care
No.
about. I remember Pat and Neil did Almost Alone, and it sold out in like 5 minutes, but I had to spend 2 months telling people that it was not a tribute band. And it was just the two of them on stage talking to each other, singing a song and telling them why they wrote the song.
I like I kind of like that as well, but that's the kind of room that you put it in. And I like small rooms. I know yours isn't a small room, but it feels like a small room. And I like that. I need the audience to create the energy. You know that we did this gig with the we did quite a lot of dates with the Stones and the Beatles and all those people from the period. And I remember that quite often they were uncomfortable at the end of the show because they thought that they hadn't connected to the audience, because the audience was all the energy going towards them and they
Right.
weren't able to share the energy of that. They were kind of just like puppets, really.
Right.
And I remember watching them going, "Oh, this isn't the Beatles that I've seen."
Right.
That
Because the
I
Beatles started out in little clubs, didn't they?
Yeah, I saw that. I was writing this story today for my radio show, and it was about seeing the Beatles, and they played a thing called Ermston Show. It was called the Twist and Shout thing. I think they got 300 quid, £300 for the show. And there were two other acts on, Brian Poole and the Tremolos and the Mavericks, or some band from Liverpool. And I got in by walking across a field into the place and climbing over a hedge with my friend. And the minute that the Beatles the stage was at 12 inches tall. Their PA speakers were on a chair on either side of the stage. And as we walked in, me and Alan Wrigley, John Lennon was standing at the side of the stage talking to the boys who came to see the band. It was no. And then when they started to play, the guy who was with me, who was the bass player, quit show business. They were so good. He goes, "Oh, Peter, we're done."
Oh,
And I thought, you know what? You can see that these guys are all having a great time. I'm going to find four idiots who will do this to have that same kind of energy that Paul and John shared on stage, and
right.
looking back at Ringo and laughing and enjoying the songs. And, that was before the Beatles decided that they wanted to impress other musicians. At the time, they were impressing anybody that
Right.
came. And it was very, very unusual, and it
When you were
inspired.
on that tour, was that before Ringo was on or after?
That they just got back from Hamburg, so Ringo was in the band. I saw them loads of times before then, but when they really became brilliant was when Ringo got in the band, like April Fool's Day or something. He
Right.
joined the band, and it completely changed it around because it freed them up to play their parts
The
instead of.
amazing thing is how many, like, you had hits, so many hits, you know, in I'm into something good, Mrs. Brown, Henry the Eighth, I am, and that, I guess, is that what you're known for? Is that what people like push you? What do they
Yeah,
scream out? Anybody
you
scream
know,
Freebird?
they do and we do it, but you know, they like. The strange thing is, I got friends who are in the music business who come to see me. Quite a few come to Canyon Club, and they always say, "We didn't know that There's a Kind of Hush would have long legs like it's got." There's a Kind of Hush, and the whole audience go all over the world.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Tonight.
And it's a great buzz. You expect them to know Henry VIII because it's not that difficult. But
I see that every time you Google your Henry the Eighth performance on the Ed Sullivan Show comes up every single time.
yeah, it's so great because we were really tongue in cheek. We didn't think that we thought that people would get the joke that when we used to play the Cavern, the Beatles had already left, but they'd always gone back and played their dates that they owed Bob Wooler. They
Oh,
had all these £30 dates, but they'd keep showing up again for the Thursday night that they'd booked in 1962.
right.
All those dates, and we'd go there, and so to be
Hey
different from
Peter,
all the other.
hold on a second. I got to tie up for got to pay my bills. So
Go
we're
for
going to
it.
take a commercial break. We'll be back in a minute with Peter Noone and Herman's Hermits. Thanks. And we're back. Here we are, Peter Noone. And we were just talking about, and what always impressed me about Peter was he actually enjoys what he does for a living. He literally enjoys what he does for anything. And we were just talking about all of the hits that you have had over your career, and most bands would kill for half of them.
We were lucky. We made records to get on the radio. We didn't make records to be long playing forever records. We wanted to be on the radio, so we mixed all those early songs down to mono, because that's what the radio was. And I think the first stereo mixes we did were No Milk Today and There's a Kind of Hush, and a couple of around there. So we only went stereo in 67. So we missed all of the FM stuff. We were a radio band. And that's why we made records for the radio. You know, we got a song called Silhouettes, and and another song called Wonderful World. Redid the song Wonderful World because Sam Cooke had been killed in Los Angeles, and went over the studio. And Eric Burden was doing Bring It On Home to Me, and we came in and we did Wonderful World, and I didn't know the song. I said I know Cupid, and I can go make the sound of the arrow with my gob. And Mickey said, no, 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 go in there. And Jimmy Page was there, and he taught me Wonderful World, you know, and it was pretty amazing, really, because it's just become, we recorded it in one take, and
It was just
the
meant to be.
drummer, yeah, the drummer didn't know that we'd cut the intro in half and played the whole thing wrong. But Mickey Mo said, next. And we said, no, 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 the drummer only caught up in the bridge. And he goes, yeah, you'll never be able to do it as good as that again. Next. And we went on to, and that's the way it was. Somebody said to me, how long did it take you to make I'm Henry VIII, I Am? I said, well, how long is the record? That's how long it took to make.
Yeah, and
We
you had,
just did things.
I mean, a lot. You had 14 singles, 11
Yeah.
albums that went gold or better. That is crazy. When you talk about like and compare you, and my favorite story is at what is it?
Wimbledon.
Wimbledon Stadium. You were telling me a story how you were sitting there and you're watching the Beatles and the Stones and everybody walk by. Can you tell me that
Yeah.
story again?
Yeah, actually, I was sitting there. I always liked to hang around with John Lennon because he was the most. First of all, he didn't have a girlfriend at the time, and I hung around with him, and he bought me my first like adult drink. I think I was about 17, and we went to the Ad Lib Club, and I got in the lift with them, and when the door opened in the club, they thought I was with the Beatles. So they sat us all at the same table, me and and Terry Doran, who worked for the Beatles. And the woman said, like, there's no way I even looked 18. I looked about 12 when I was 17. And she said, there's a two drink minimum. And John says, I'll have two Bacardis and he'll have two Cokes. And we sat there. And then next time I saw him was at Wembley Stadium, which was sold out, 10,000 people. The headliners were the Beatles, and we're looking at all the bands coming on. It's like the Trogs and the Yardbirds, and Jeff Beck, his pedals on the other side of the stage, and you see him all through a song. We're laughing at
Right.
what's going on, and making fun, and you go, oh, he must own a van, that kind of band stuff. Oh,
Right.
no, he's got a PA. He's no good. He owns the PA. And John said to me, "Careful, Hermit, you're on next."
Yeah.
He always called me Hermit, which kind of I would have preferred Herman or Peter, but I was known as Hermit to the Beatles.
Well, I get it amazing because people always think the British invasion what it was, but it was a bunch of bands that came over. And currently, what do you think of the K-pop? Because they're trying to say now that the K-pop is a genre, not a fad.
You
And did you?
know, I never really gave much attention to the press because I remember reading that the Dave Clark Five had knocked the Beatles off the number one spot in America, and how embarrassed Dave Clark was to have to live up to that because nobody wanted to do better than the Beatles.
Right. I like
That was not
your original conversations when you said you got rid of the four guys and got four guys that were going to have fun. And that
yeah.
sometimes is what it is. And you know what? Fans know when a band is having fun when they're playing. It is a whole
Oh yeah.
vibe in the venue. You
Yeah,
know,
my band have fun and they get paid.
yes. And nowadays
You
they
know,
get paid a reasonable amount, not such a crazy amount. But in all the times you've played, probably close to 50 times you've played with me, money has never been the issue. And I don't want to make it the issue, Peter, but money has never been the issue because to me, what I do is trade public money. I'm just deciding how many people want to come see Herman's Hermits how many people and how much are they going to pay, and make sure you get to walk away with enough money. And that's why
Well,
I say the Canyon Club, the average person comes there 15.5 times a year.
wow,
When I
that's
ran,
fantastic.
yeah, when I ran House of Blues, it was 1.1 times a year. And
Huh.
that was the difference of being in like New Orleans and being in
Yeah,
Agora, where the only people who come to the Canyon in Agora are people who live like within 30 miles
yeah.
of the Canyon Club.
Oh, yeah. I see a lot of people from Santa Barbara make that trip. It's about, I don't know how far it is, but it's only an hour. So I think it draws, it, first of all, I think the trick, I talk to Howie, my agent, all the time. You have to keep the tickets affordable because people who see Herman's Hermits now remember paying $3.50 and having the Who open.
You're the only artist that ever cared about that. And it's funny, and that's probably why I
Yeah.
like you so much because it's about making these people happy. It's 90 minutes of their life. I'm going to make them happy.
Well, I think that is, I got in show business by, my hobby was music, and I had the best record collection in town by far, almost 100% American records. And one day, somebody asked me, would I join a band as a lead singer? I'd been in bands as a guitar player, and when I was the lead guitar player, I was not Joe Bonamassa, but a lot of people said, why don't you become the lead singer? Put down that guitar. So one day I became the lead singer of a band, and I enjoyed every minute of being the lead singer in the band and telling my stories. And I always remember you could see Herman's Hermits and the Who and the Blues Magoos for $5. Don't forget that. That audience, or my audience, know what they remember paying $5.
Yeah, but I know, but as I get older, because even like gas prices or bagel, my
Yeah.
biggest thing is donuts. I coach football. So I used to buy like 6 dozen donuts for the kids on Saturday morning after the game. And it used to be like $6 or $9 a dozen. Yeah, you spend $100. No big deal. Now they want $36 a dozen. And I'm like, oh my, I feel like my grandfather, where I walked
Yeah.
both ways to school uphill in the snow with bare feet.
The true, it's significant. You just have to make more money than your wife can possibly spend. And if the donuts are thrown in there you go. You just have to make more money.
Well,
And let's
Peter, I
all
don't
go with
think you
that.
know my wife. She manages uh, Todrick Hall and she's in Broadway. She can
Oh,
burn through lots of money very quickly in Broadway. I realized that that's why when I saw you had played Broadway, I was like, ooh, that is, and she was trying to explain to me the deals, and
oh yeah.
the Broadway people get nothing. The theater gets everything, and I'm like, I don't think that works in our business. We have to live on 15%, and we have to
Yeah.
get our expenses out of the 15%.
Yeah. Hey, show business is not an easy game. Somebody once said to me, show business is the art of making something very difficult and not pleasant look cheap and fun, look like you're having fun, and it's available to everyone. Like my friends who go and see the Eagles, all they talk about is how fantastic the show was and how much money the Eagles are making.
Right, and
And
that
I
is
blame
true.
the Stones. I blame the Stones. They started to say, "Oh, we're grossing $6 billion on this tour and everything." Everybody started to talk about money again. It
Right.
was never about money. The Stones were never about
And
money.
do you think that's the biggest thing from 1965 to 2026? Like, what has changed in the music business? Because I've been in it almost the entire time. So you literally have been in it the entire time and you've seen the different trends because I remember when the touring used to be supported by the record companies. Now, even when I started House of Blues, we would get
Yeah.
two, three, four, $5,000 checks from the record companies, and they would bring 50 to 100 people to every show. And literally, the last 17 years, nothing, nothing. There, I don't
Yeah.
even think record labels like. Did you produce your own records? What record label were you on?
Well, we were lucky. We accidentally were independent, like the Stones. We delivered the records, and this is the single. You know what
Oh,
I
so
mean? We
you did
didn't.
everything.
Yeah, we owned everything from the beginning. So I think Dave Clark did as well, and the Beatles. By accident, we somehow slipped through the net, and we were dumped by Capitol in America. And so was the Dave Clark Five, actually. They got us for free, but they didn't want us. We've already got two bands with guitars in them, the Beach Boys and the Ventures. So, no, thank you. So we were all set free. And of course, those records, those labels never supported anybody.
Right.
Independent labels didn't have money to support anything.
So when you
They
were
they
out there
wanted all the money for
touring,
them.
yeah, and that's still I can't get over that you like on a stadium you'd gross $70,000, and I think now
Yeah,
the labor bill on the stadium is probably $70,000.
that's inflation. I mean,
Are you an equipment guy? Because like if you've seen the
yeah.
differences of an equipment,
Yeah, but I try to, as you know from my rider when I play the Kenyan, I try to keep it to I don't want, I want it all to be able to fit in a van to prove that my theme is a better idea. Joe Bonamassa, when he tours, he carries his amplifier in and out of the car.
well, Joe Bonamassa got his start at the Canyon Club.
I- I'm
You
sure
know,
he did, but I'm inspired by people like that, and Vince Gill carries his own amplifier onto the stage and plugs it in. That's another kind of show business. We want to be the band that can get it all in the van, and the money goes to the people in the band, not to the five roadies and the two girl managers and the hairdresser
you're
and the
not
makeup
bonusing the
department.
bus driver $1 million, huh?
No, we're not going to do it. Let Chubby Checker keep the boss.
Well, the crazy thing is they talk about that, and as customers and fans realize, they're paying extra money for that. And at the end of
Yeah,
the day, there's a ton of bands out there like that because who just Chevy Metal just confirmed, and I'm not supposed to tell anybody, but I will because I don't know when this will air. But Chevy Metal confirmed, and you wouldn't think like a Melissa Etheridge or those guys would play the Canyon Club. Yeah, I get one of them once a month, and look, I have
yeah.
Hermits coming, and
There you
and
go.
you were filling stadiums. And the crazy thing is, I think what people think of music is it brings them back to the best times of their life. Like
I think so.
when I listen to you, that's why you sing along and you can't stop yourself from singing along.
Well, music's always been a transportation system, hasn't it, really? You go into where you were when that's what I do. When I sing the song, I'm back in the studio. I'm looking at John Paul Jones playing the bass on the record and trying to conduct the orchestra with his face, you know. That's all good stuff to me.
But I see you do it. That's the way I look at it when I put on concerts.
There
Duct
you go.
tape and I just put on the concert regardless. To me, it's all about the feeling when you that first downbeat. And I look out there and then I can go home. At that point, everybody's in the club, everybody's fed, everybody's got a drink, and they're all smiling. I've done my job.
There you go. And I appreciate that. I know you understand. It's a lot of people don't understand, but they're all new in the business. It takes a long time to get knowledge. I came in show 1961 was my first gig, and I knew nothing about anything. I didn't know I knew nothing about everything. I thought I was the smartest kid.
Right.
I knew nothing. And every time I do a concert, I learn something new. And people say, well, why? I said, well, I didn't know. I've learned another thing not to do tonight.
Isn't that funny? We talked about that in my manager meeting last week. Success. I asked them what the opposite of success is. They all say failure, and I say it's not. I've failed more than any human being on the face of the planet, and I learn from every time, and I get better, and I get better. Sadly, it was at Lowe's Hotel's expense, and it was at House of Blues expense. But now I kind of know what works and what doesn't work. I've lost a lot of other people's money learning to do what I do.
Yeah.
So, in all the years, I want to know this. Like in a conversation, you're bringing up names, John Paul Jones. You're just bringing up these names. It's just these people are just sitting next to you. Who is the most impressive person you've ever met? It's going to be John Lennon, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's a lot of other people that I had more time with, like Jack Bruce. I was very impressed with Jack Bruce because he was such a sort of journeyman musician, and he kept ending up in bands with Ginger Baker. And Jack Bruce was impressive because he kind of saved my life once I was in this club, and Ginger Baker tried to pick a fight with me, and I fancied myself as a bit of a fighter, and I was ready to go outside and kick his ass, and Jack Bruce took hold of me and said, Peter, don't go out there, he'll kill you. And it was at least 40 years later, I was on Lexington Avenue in New York with Jack, a bit under the weather, and we were
A
both
bit
sort of
blue.
wandering. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mentioned that old Ginger Baker because I'd just done a session with Ginger Baker, who was a complete nut. And he said, "Oh yeah, I remember that time when he was going to kill you." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Oh no, Peter,
He was
he would
going
have
to kill
killed
you.
you. It wasn't a fight. He wanted to kill you." Oh, okay.
When at my first, like when I worked my way through to get to House of Blues days, I worked at a place called the Wildcat, the Devil House. And it was so funny because you could walk up to the Wildcat or Devil House and call out of a security guard to fight. And it was okay to do that. And I think
Yeah,
about like today's society, I don't know if they could survive. Like my parents, they had kids. And I think that's what they thought their obligation was. After they had the kids, we just ran amok. And my favorite thing
yeah,
is my butt is all over every station if you look back because remember in the 70s when people were streaking,
yeah.
I would take my clothes off at a drop of the hat. My favorite one was
Oh,
I in halftime at the football game at Red Hook. I got undressed, I streaked through the football game and then I went and played. And I couldn't believe no one knew it was me. How could they not know it was me? I would have a
well,
pair of underwear on my head. That's it.
they thought you had a bigger tadger.
Yes, I realized that. So
Yeah,
so like you're not an equipment person. So like have you watched do you remember Ticketron?
yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
it's
whole
funny.
thing is just wild stuff, and what they've done without knowing it is that the whole business has been taken away from the small promoters who were the people who created the business,
Right.
and they've had all the business taken away from them, and it's become, I once did a gig in Northern California, and I did it on my own, and I did pretty good business. And then I went back the next year, and there were three other acts on the bill, and we did less business. I said, "What the hell's going on?" And they said, "Well, the company don't care. They've got 182 shows out tonight, and if two of them make money, they'll be happy."
Right.
Well, okay, that's the end of that business, So we've,
That's the whole Live Nation model. I do
yeah,
remember that because they don't care about making money and if they overpay then that means the smaller clubs don't get them and I know you play for Gary down in at the Coach House too.
yeah.
And I think we're the only two left here in Southern
In
California.
California, probably, yeah, but it doesn't matter how many's left. It's just so long as people still go to them. Remember, if there's only two, then everybody who wants that kind of music has to go to you two.
I think it's funny because I think I cost Live Nation a lot of money because I know they watch everything I do. And for me to do well is different because I live where people live. And I am just, the music starts at 9, you're home by 11, babysitter can go home, and you almost could bring your kids to my venue. Whereas I think
People
about
do.
like going down to Staples, you have to drive down there. It's an entire day. It's $100 to valet park there now. $100.
This is a theory. In 1964, 70,000 people dropped their teenage girls off at Shea Stadium and said, "We'll come back around 7:30 to pick you up." Can
And
you
it was
imagine
just a
dropping your
mess.
kids, and they all showed up?
I
If
have
you
one
drop your kids off at Shea now,
I
at
have
Shea
one of
Stadium
those.
now.
Yeah, I have one of those that I can tell you. I do bad religion. So and people would drop their like 9 years old off to bad religion. I would stand at the front door and go, there's a mosh pit, but he's fine, he's fine. And you're like, oh my good, you would believe how many bar mitzvahs I do. I get into fights with
Yeah.
the parents because they think that they're allowed to feed their kid alcohol, and I'm
Oh,
like, oh no, that's
yeah,
against the law. If I
yeah,
let you do that, I get a ticket, the bartender gets a ticket, the kid gets a
yeah,
ticket, and you get a ticket. And your ticket's the
yes,
worst out of the deal.
yeah. Hey,
Yes.
But that's the biggest change of all. That you we all only want to go to places where we're safe now.
Well, I tell people all the time that making someone a regular isn't really serving them. Making them a regular means you're making them part of this decision because we ask actually our talent, our patrons, who do you want us to book? You know, other than the Elton Johns, which we have to laugh at because they really have no concept of what we do. But we will ask them, and a lot of them come up with great ideas. And the biggest thing that's happening now is like I have Larry Dunn from Earth, Wind, and Fire playing. So I get Earth, Wind, and Fire. Chicago's the same way, where there's 15 Chicago bands because so all the people you're talking about, I go by names more than I go by the names of the bands. Because you book Foreigner today, I don't know who's in Foreigner. Sometimes
Yeah.
you get something good, sometimes not. But I can only imagine coming to see Herman's Hermits without you. You are Herman's
Well,
Hermits.
it did happen, but it's you see, I'm kind of proud of Herman's Hermits, so I'm happy to have that name with me. I think it was a great trademark, and it's fun memories. It was kind of a bit silly and a bit tongue in cheek, but it started like that at the Cavern when we opened with My Boy Lollipop,
Yeah, and
which was confusing.
but Henry VIII, I am, like you said, you're right. How long did it
Yeah,
take you to write the song? But everybody
yeah,
knows it. But I don't. I look at that as a shtick you did. And but that
yeah.
that song has to be that has been around forever.
1910 or something, and
Yeah.
Harry Champion did the original recording of it.
I'm from Chicago. I did not know that.
No,
Wow.
Harry Champion. No, Harry
Oh,
Champion was
oh, I was like, wow. So
no
when you started,
1910.
there was no internet. So explain to people like how you would go about researching stuff. Do
You
you
know,
even
you ask a policeman.
right,
We didn't know anything, so everything we learn on our feet, and that's how you learn. That's how you learn properly. If you miss one plane, you never ever miss another plane in your life if you're still in the band.
right? True.
You know,
You
so
learn through big mistakes.
yeah, we played Macon, Georgia, and Little Anthony went on before after us. What were we thinking? You don't do that. You don't follow the Stones.
Well, now tell me what it was like being on the Ed Sullivan show. Did Ed talk to you, or were you literally just there? He pointed at you, you sang, and then you were off.
He was like a fan of the group because we were all yes sir people, and because we knew he was important, and he came over to me. He said, "My tonight the show, Peter, my friend, Peter Herman Moon." He even got my name wrong, So and then he said, at the end of the thing, he came over to me and he said, you a Roman Catholic? I go, yeah. He said, meet me tomorrow morning at Delmonico. He lived in this building on Park Avenue. And we walked together to St. Patrick's Church, where he would go on Sunday morning to the Mass. And he was the biggest star in the world, People
Right.
don't realize he was the
He
biggest
was
star in
Johnny Carson.
America. Yeah. And people left him alone because he was going to Mass. He didn't have four bodyguards with leather coats and machetes under the collar. He walked along like a bloke, a regular person,
And
and people respected that.
the most interesting person, you were on Jackie Gleason's show. I forgot he had a show. He had a variety
Oh,
show.
we loved him. He was great. We showed up at his house in Miami, and we in England in those days they sold you 5 bottles of booze in a box for like five. I guess it was a gallon of booze. Each person was allowed to take 1 gallon of booze into America. So we showed up at Miami and we showed up his front door and we got out of the car. Each hermit had 5 bottles of booze for him, which was 25 bottles of booze. Because we thought it was like a drinking man, and his wife thought,
Yeah.
"Oh, put those back in the car. He's just joined AA."
Oh, geez. That sounds like something I would do.
You can out AA people now because they're
Yeah.
dead.
Back
But
then, it was not okay.
yeah,
People were
yeah,
embarrassed.
yeah.
So you also were on Dean Martin's show.
Yeah, he was great as well. And you know, I live near a guy. I went to Dean Martin's house because he had a son who was in a band called Dino, Desi, and Billy, and we'd done the Dean Martin show, and we got on great with him. You know, because we were, you know, just typical musicians. We were nice people out on the road, not
And
knowing
you were
where to go
impressed
next.
because he was Dean Martin.
Yeah, absolutely. A massive amount of respect. And he took us back to his house, which is really nice. And I met his son, who was in a band, Dino, Desi, and Billy. They did a couple of songs. And I ended up sitting next to Jimmy Connors, who became a really famous tennis player
Right.
and is now my neighbor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he lives up here in Santa Barbara.
Well, I can't wait. He's coming soon. He comes all the time. This is Peter Noone from Herman's Hermits. Thank you so much for entertaining us. You are a legend. Thank you.
I'll be looking. Hey, I'll be looking forward to seeing you at the Canyon, Lance. Take care of yourself.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Have a great one, and we'll see you next week. Thank you, guys.